Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen stood on the prow of her largest ship, the wind whipping her silver-gold hair back from her face. She heard the distant roar of Drogon circling above the fleet, a majestic sentinel with leathery wings beating against the salt air. The fleet's sails strained to keep pace with the dragons overhead, and Daenerys felt a hum of anticipation run along the deck. This crossing was no ordinary voyage. It was an exodus of a new era, a turning of the page in history. She had set out from the Bay of Meereen not only with the might of the Unsullied and the Dothraki, but with the unstoppable fury of dragons, her children sharpened and tested in battle. She cast her gaze forward across the choppy waters. The horizon remained a mystery, but rumors came swirling on the lips of sailors and spies. The Red Keep in King's Landing stood as proud and unassailable as ever, a fortress of stone built to withstand sieges and storms. She knew the Lannisters thought themselves safe behind those walls under the cloak of their borrowed power. But Daenerys Targaryen was no common invader. She had spent years in exile, forging alliances, freeing slaves, and struggling against betrayals in the East. Every battle tested her mettle, but each conflict also strengthened her resolve to take back the throne that was rightfully hers by blood. Her father, the Mad King, had once threatened to burn King's Landing to the ground, but Daenerys had never been a mirror of his cruelty. She fought for life, to break the wheel of tyranny that crushed the common folk. Yet war was a savage teacher. It demanded harsh lessons, and sometimes the only language it understood was fire. As the morning sun flared in her eyes, she reflected on the bold plan that danced before her. She would strike at the Red Keep before her armies landed, unleashing the dragon's fury from the skies. It was Tyrion who had first warned her about the dangers of unleashing dragon fire on the capital. His greatest fear was that she would become what her father had been. The Lannisters would use that fear against her, painting her as a ruthless conqueror, uninterested in innocent lives. She had listened, understanding the caution. But events had forced her hand. Word traveled that Cersei was rallying new alliances, forging a hidden pact with the Iron Bank, and even stirring the seeds of old grudges among the lords of Westeros. If the city was allowed to steel itself further, the cost to take it would be unimaginable. A single, preemptive strike aimed directly at the Lannisters' seat of power could fracture the myth of their invincibility. It might also spare countless lives in the forthcoming invasion. It was not cruelty or lust for vengeance that guided her, but the pragmatism of war. She had no interest in seeing King's Landing starve under a protracted siege, nor did she wish to see her armies decimated by the cunning twists of gold-backed plots. By burning the symbol of the Lannisters' grip on power, she would send an unambiguous message. But it also meant that she would have to accept what chaos might follow. Once Dragonfire was unleashed, there would be no stepping back from the realm's fear and perhaps reverence of her might. As she stood there, footsteps approached from behind. She recognized Missandei's measured tread even before the young woman spoke. With a respectful incline of her head, Missandei informed her that the lords of the newly allied houses sought audience with her in the captain's quarters. Daenerys nodded, her heart tightening with the weight of leadership. "Tell them I will come at once," she said softly, her tone laced with the confidence she had acquired through trial and triumph. Missandei turned away, and Daenerys followed, sparing one last glance at the wide, endless sea. For a moment, the memories of Karth, Astapor, and Yunkai swept through her mind. The hush of fear she had witnessed in slaver cities when her dragons were set loose. The hush that came just before freedom. It was never a choice made lightly, but each time she had decided to invoke the power in her blood, it had changed the course of her destiny. Inside the ship's cramped quarters, a mix of newly pledged Westerosi lords and Essosi advisors waited for her. Their gazes fell upon her with reverence and curiosity, but she knew they also harbored doubts. Tyrion stood at one side, his keen eyes analyzing the social currents in the room. Grey Worm stood near the door, a silent sentinel embodying loyalty and discipline. On the table lay scattered maps of the Westerosi coastline, accompanied by reports and Raven's messages. One lord from the Reach, an older man with weathered skin and wary eyes, stepped forward. His name was Lord Redwine, newly sworn to her cause after the downfall of Cersei's alliance with his house. "Your Grace," he said, bowing stiffly. "We have word that King's Landing braces for your invasion. Cersei's archers and ballisti stand ready. They fortify their gates, and rumor has it they have wildfire caches hidden under certain sections of the city." Daenerys pursed her lips. The mention of wildfire echoed with old ghosts of the Targaryen lineage. "I will not let the past mistakes define me. But I must make the decisive move before she can wield that terror against us." Tyrion cleared his throat. "Your Grace, if we are to strike, we must be surgical. Even with the dragons, we need a plan that ensures we do not burn the city to ashes. Our armies are poised to capture it, not annihilate it. She met his gaze. I have no intention of laying waste to King's Landing. The city belongs to the people, not to the Lannisters. But the Red Keep stands as the symbol of their power. Her tone steadied, and she allowed a hint of passion to warm her words. If I can break that, if I can seize it from the sky without incurring staggering losses, then the rest of the city may surrender to me. We can achieve a swift victory and spare bloodshed on both sides. A hush followed. Some lords exchanged uncertain glances. She knew what they all wondered. Was this the first step of the Mad King's daughter, or was this the merciful solution she promised? Jorah Mormont, ever steadfast in his support, bent a knee at her side. I believe in you, Khaleesi. I have seen what your dragons can do, but I have also seen the compassion in your heart. If you feel this is the path, then I will follow. She rested a hand on his shoulder. He had traveled a long, treacherous road with her. He, more than anyone, had witnessed her evolution from a frightened girl sold to the Dothraki to the mother of dragons who freed entire cities of slaves. His trust mattered. It was a reminder that she was not alone in her convictions. Tyrion stepped forward, folding his arms. If we do this, we must do it swiftly and precisely. The Red Keep's architecture has changed little since my youth, but I recall every tower, every courtyard, every vulnerable wall. If Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion strike the keep itself and not the crowded streets, it may be enough to scatter the defenders. Grey Worm, stoic and strong, spoke at last. My Unsullied will be ready to advance. Once the Red Keep is in ashes, the morale of Cersei's guard will break. Daenerys nodded. She fixed each face in turn with a gaze that carried the weight of her heritage. Then it is decided, she said quietly, feeling the gravity of that moment like an invisible chain around her heart. Prepare. We strike at dawn. That night, the mood across the fleet shifted. Soldiers sharpened their swords, counting hours until they would land on Westerosi soil. Many men gathered in hushed circles, sharing wineskins and exchanging stories about home, uncertain of what the dawn would bring. Dothraki riders prowled the decks, restless in their excitement for the glorious battle. The sea sighed in gentle waves against the hulls, as if giving the men and women one last lullaby before the storm of war. Daenerys remained in her cabin, alone except for the crackle of a small lantern. Shadows flickered on the wall, reminiscent of dancing dragons. She thought of her children, roosting with watchful eyes somewhere high above. She thought of Viserys, her brother, and the bitter fantasies he had inflicted upon her about her royal birthright. She thought of all those who had stood in her path, calling her a usurper or a beggar queen. Now the tide had changed, and her will could shift the fate of nations. Tyrion had left her with maps and details of the city's defenses. She saw the sprawl of King's Landing in her mind, the walls, the gates, the labyrinthine streets, the potential for chaos. But her focus landed on the Red Keep, perched on Aegon's high hill, looming over the entire city like a sentinel of old Targaryen might, now occupied by the family that had orchestrated her own family's ruin. She recalled the stories of Aegon the Conqueror, the founder of their dynasty, who once flew forth with his sisters and their dragons to unite the 7 kingdoms under one banner. How that had shaped Westeros for centuries. She was his descendant, and her destiny called her to reclaim what was lost. Yet she carried the memory of her father's madness as a cautionary tale. Fire could be used to free, or it could be used to terrorize. Tomorrow, she prayed, she would use it to create a path for justice. Sleep came in fitful dozes, fraught with visions of flames licking stone, of people crying out in both fear and relief. The lines between conqueror and liberator blurred in her dreams. But each time she saw the Iron Throne, she also saw thousands of freed slaves trailing behind her, hopeful faces turned skyward. In her dreams, she promised them a better world. When dawn finally broke, it arrived on a hush of gray light. The sea was smooth and dull, a perfect canvas for the drama about to unfold. The dragons soared overhead as if sensing their mother's resolve. Daenerys donned her leathers, pinned the 3-headed dragon brooch to her shoulder, and stepped onto the deck. Tyrion, Grey Worm, Jorah, and Missandei were already there, each wearing a grave expression. This was a day that would mark the realm's history forever. Are the dragons ready? Daenerys asked, scanning the sky. They await your command, Jorah said. As do we all. The ships maneuvered closer to the narrow beaches near Blackwater Bay, the shallows swirling with the tide. She could see the outline of King's Landing in the distance, its walls and towers shaped by the rising sun. It was a city she had never seen before, yet it carried the ghosts of her ancestors. She mounted Drogon with practiced grace, feeling the rumble of his living power beneath her thighs. He snorted, exhaling a burst of smoke, and spread his wings wide. Rhaegal and Viserion followed suit, each one taking to the air with thunderous wing beats that stirred salt spray from the waves. Behind her, the fleet ready to land. The unsullied Dothraki would make landfall further up the coast outside the main city gates. But her task was to make the initial strike. Her mouth was dry with tension, yet her eyes shone with fierce purpose. Today, she would let the realm see that Daenerys Stormborn was not simply coming for a crown. She was coming to reshape their reality, to break the chains of tyranny once and for all. With a wordless cry, she commanded Drogon to rise. Tyrion, Yora, and the rest watched from below as the dragons soared higher, cutting through the crisp morning air. The city unfurled beneath them, a tapestry of rooftops and winding streets. Far below, Daenerys glimpsed the sprawl of red-tiled houses, narrow alleys, and the shimmering surface of the Blackwater Rush. She saw the great walls that had once barred her ancestors from retaking their home. She pressed her knees into Drogon's flanks, urging him forward. The Red Keep stood on the highest hill, an imposing structure of red stone. From this vantage point, it seemed almost small in comparison to the boundless sky. But Daenerys knew that behind those walls, countless archers waited, scorpions likely aimed at the skies, ready to strike her dragons down if they dared come close. Her heart pounded, matching the heavy whoosh of Drogon's wings. She could feel the heat emanating from his scaled body. She had to trust her instincts and the bond she shared with her children. They had survived slavers, monstrous armies, and the dangers of the Dothraki Sea. Today, they would challenge the seat of Westerosi power itself. Below, chaos began. Bells rang out through the city, warning of dragons approaching. Soldiers scrambled to man the battlements. Crossbow bolts soared upward, but most fell short, harmlessly plunking into distant rooftops or sailing into the water. A wave of panic rippled through the streets as small folk saw the monstrous shapes overshadowing the sun. Even from high above, Daenerys sensed their fear. She steeled her resolve, telling herself that what she did today could ultimately save them from a worse fate. With a swift pivot of her body, she guided Drogon into a dive directly toward the Red Keep. Rhaegal and Viserion roared and followed, the trio forming a wedge of unstoppable flame. In her mind's eye, she pictured the keep's ramparts, the vulnerable spots Tyrion had told her about. She saw the tall tower that overlooked the throne room where Cersei might be hiding. And then she gave Drogon the command. Dracarys. The roar that followed was as much hers as it was Drogon's, a bellow of defiance and destiny. Flame erupted from the dragon's maw, white-hot and unforgiving. It struck the Red Keep's highest parapets, crashing into stone and setting ablaze any wooden structures in its path. The defenders on the walls screamed and scattered. A few archers fired desperate shots at the dragons, but the swirling flames consumed them before their bolts found a mark. Drogon's flames spread along the battlements, igniting towers, walkways, and scaffolding. Rhaegal and Viserion swooped lower, strafing the fortress walls with their own jets of dragon fire. Stone cracked under the intensity of the heat, and smoke poured into the sky, an inky cloud that blotted out the rising sun. Daenerys circled around, ensuring that the blasts targeted the keep's strongholds. She did not direct the fire toward the city streets below. This was a precise strike meant to terrorize and demolish the seat of Lannister power. Even from above, she could see the fear in the eyes of the soldiers who dared glance up at the living storms above them. A massive scorpion bolt launched from a hidden courtyard, whistling past Drogon's wing. She felt the sting of terror in her chest, but Drogon twisted in midair, narrowly evading the projectile. Rhaegal banked sharply to unleash a retaliatory plume of fire that engulfed the scorpion crew. Stone walls glowed red, timbers popped and crackled, and the very seat of Lannister rule began to crumble under this onslaught. The Red Keep, for centuries a symbol of royal might, was rapidly turning into a pyre. Daenerys felt a pang of sorrow despite her resolve. She remembered her ancestors who had once walked these halls when it was a Targaryen stronghold. But it was no longer a place of her kin, it had become a lair of her enemies. Another scorpion loosed a bolt. This time it struck Viserion's flank, scraping scales and causing the dragon to shriek in pain. Daenerys' heart seized. She urged Drogon to protect his wounded brother, steering him into a downward rush of ferocious flame. The scorpion crew died screaming, consumed by the fiery torrent. Viserion flapped wildly but stayed aloft, letting out a throbbing roar that carried both rage and pain. Through the rolling smoke, Daenerys scanned the Red Keep's courtyard. Soldiers were fleeing in every direction, some throwing down their weapons. A portion of the walls had collapsed entirely, sending dust and debris into the swirling chaos below. She pressed her lips together, scanning for any sign of Cersei or high-ranking Lannisters. If Cersei still lived, she was likely somewhere deep within the fortress, locked behind layers of stone. but the time for subtlety had ended. Tyrion's plan had never been to capture Cersei alive in this moment. It was to shatter her seat of power so thoroughly that she would never recover. Daenerys roared once more, urging Drogon into another barrage of flame, this time aimed at the keep's central tower. The inferno roiled and spread, devouring the structure from within. The heat billowing from below scorched the air. Smoke stung Daenerys' eyes, and yet she pressed on. She had to ensure the fortress was broken beyond quick repair. Her armies, landing on the beaches beyond the city walls, would soon storm the gates. If they found the Red Keep in ruin, the capital's resistance might collapse. The day would be hers. At last, she peeled away, letting Drogon flap higher to avoid the worst of the black smoke. Rhaegal and Viserion followed, each letting out triumphant roars. Below them, the Red Keep lay in half-ruins. Flames still licked at the stone, plumes of choking blackness rose to the sky, and those within the fortress walls scattered like ants from a burning anthill. Daenerys took a moment to breathe. Her muscles trembled and her mind reeled from the intensity of unleashing such a colossal force. She had done it. She had brought Dragonfire to the heart of King's Landing, striking a blow so bold that none could deny her presence. This was the power of House Targaryen reborn. Yet she felt no glee, only a somber resolve. It was a necessity, a choice made in the crucible of war. She guided Drogon out toward the sea, away from the city's center, to regroup with her forces. Below, she saw the gates opening in confusion and panic. The Unsullied marched in disciplined ranks through the chaos, while Dothraki riders poured in, howling war cries that echoed off the smoke-shrouded walls. Pockets of resistance sprang up, but the defenders' morale was visibly shaken by the sight of their crumbling fortress. Daenerys prepared for her next move. She would land outside the city gates, secure a vantage, and receive word from her officers. The crucial part now was to consolidate her victory, to show mercy where possible, and to claim the city before the fires spread beyond control. She held on to the memory of her dream, the promise of a better world for those who had suffered under tyrants. She would not fail them now that she had set the skies ablaze with her will. Thus began the day that would forever change the course of Westeros. The day Daenerys Stormborn burned the Red Keep before ever setting foot on the soil of King's Landing. And though the realm would tremble at her name, she carried with her the conviction that she was not her father's daughter in madness, but the true heir who sought to cleanse the realm of corruption. In the wake of that fiery dawn, a queen rose in the sky, determined to guide her people through the flames and into a new era of hope. Smoke still clung to the horizon as Daenerys guided Drogon down to a bluff overlooking King's Landing. From here, she could see the city unfolding below like a broken tapestry. The Red Keep smoldered in the distance. Its once proud towers collapsed into ruin and flame. Over the roar of the winds and the cries of alarm echoing from the streets, she heard her blood pounding in her ears. She was dizzy with it all, the fear, the adrenaline, and the heartbreaking necessity of what she had done. Rhaegal landed a short distance away, favoring the side where the Scorpion's bolt had grazed him. Viserion swooped to circle overhead, watchful, ensuring no hidden threat would catch them unawares. Even the clamor of battle felt muted by the thick blanket of smoke that hung over the city. Upon dismounting, she was immediately surrounded by Unsullied soldiers forming a protective cordon. Grey Worm approached, his face etched with pride and caution. "Your Grace," he said simply, bowing. The word carried more weight than any salute. He had fought for her across the sea, had bled for her, and now stood witness to her claim on Westeros. A ripple of movement behind Grey Worm announced the arrival of Tyrion, panting from a hard ride up the bluff's path. His eyes darted toward the flaming Red Keep, and a flash of sorrow and awe crossed his features. It had been, for so long, his home. He had walked those corridors, known every secret passage, and had once believed he might die within those crimson walls. Now they lay in ruins. "It's done," he said quietly, swallowing. "The Red Keep is broken." Daenerys nodded. She couldn't yet voice the tumult of emotion swirling inside her. Victory, relief, a sadness for the legacy consumed by fire, and a sense of grim resolve for what lay ahead. With a gesture, she beckoned Tyrion forward. "We must move swiftly. Sound the call for surrender. The city must know that if they lay down their arms, they will find mercy." Tyrion gave a somber nod. "I'll see to it, Your Grace. The bells are already tolling throughout King's Landing, but we need to ensure everyone understands our terms." She looked back at the smoldering fortress. The black smoke rose in thick coils as though the land itself lamented the downfall of this monument. And if they do not surrender? Tyrion's voice was low. We must hope they do. Further bloodshed will only breed resentment and revenge. Daenerys clenched her jaw, letting the moment pass without further remark. She had not come all this way to bathe in the blood of innocents, but she knew war left few clean hands. Secure the main gates, she said at last. Ensure that any Lannister banners left in the city are torn down. Fly the dragon sigils in their place. Let the people see that a new power reigns. Grey Worm saluted, turning to lead a detachment of Unsullied downhill. The men's boots thumped in unison, a living engine of discipline and might. Dothraki riders thundered by as well, whooping in triumph, though many had reigned in their initial bloodlust at Daenerys' command. She intended to capture a city, not destroy it, and so the outriders corralled pockets of resistance while letting unarmed citizens flee to safety. Daenerys glanced at Tyrion, who lingered. The flicker in his eyes told her that beneath his loyalty there was turmoil. She did not begrudge him that. He had grown up within those very walls. He had once believed in the possibility of a different family, a different kingdom. Any word on Cersei? She asked softly. He shook his head. No one has seen her emerge. It's possible she took refuge in the lower vaults or the dungeons. With the Red Keep in flames, those might be collapsed by now. If she still lives. She'd be trapped, Daenerys finished. They both stared at the ruin, letting the moment of finality sink in. Cersei, that unrelenting foe, might now be buried beneath the very stones that once crowned her as Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. A strange hush settled upon them, and in that hush, Daenerys felt the turning of an era. At length, she mounted Drogon again, leaving Tyrion to coordinate the next steps. She wanted to circle the city to see with her own eyes how King's Landing fared. The morning sun had risen higher, casting the black plumes in a stark light, and as Drogon soared overhead, Daenerys peered down upon the teeming masses. Already, some gates had been forced open by her forces, and citizens were trickling out in desperate columns, hands raised in surrender or simply seeking to flee the chaos. Others clustered in the squares, kneeling as unsullied phalanxes ushered them into submission. The city was hers for the taking, but she did not revel in it. Her heart was heavy, and each breath tasted of smoke. She saw a group of children cowering near the foot of a statue guarded by an old man whose eyes shone with terror. Daenerys felt a pang in her chest. These were the ones she wanted to protect, the ones who had no say in who ruled them. They had suffered under the Lannisters, and now they trembled before her. Through the thick haze, she guided Drogon to a wide plaza near the city center, far from the flames, where the ground was scattered with debris but relatively open. There she dismounted gracefully, soot swirling around her boots. Almost at once, the small folk shrank back. Some dropped to their knees. Others, emboldened or desperate, rushed forward before the Unsullied could stop them. Daenerys raised a hand, halting her guards. She was not afraid of these terrified people. She had walked among freed slaves, seen the lash marks on their backs, tended to their wounds, and promised them justice. She wanted these citizens of Westeros to see her as more than a conqueror. Don't be afraid, she called out, her voice echoing off the stone buildings. I am Daenerys Stormborn, and I have come to free you from the tyranny that has weighed upon you. I want peace for all of us. Her words trembled in the smoky air, but a few faces brightened with cautious hope. A woman in a tattered dress stepped forward, tears streaking her soot-stained cheeks. She gazed at Daenerys as though the queen was some creature from a legend, equal parts wonder and fear. We heard the Red Keep, it's burning, the woman said in a wavering voice. Daenerys inclined her head. Yes, the fortress of your oppressors has fallen. I will not see the city locked in the grip of a false queen. But neither do I wish to see its people perish. She took a steadying breath, scanning the faces around her. Any who lay down their arms will be spared. Any who take the knee will be allowed to live in peace. I will feed the hungry, shelter the lost. But I cannot allow the Lannisters' tyranny to stand another day. There was a shifting in the crowd as if a great weight had lifted, replaced by uncertainty and a flicker of something like relief. The children peered out from behind the old man, their eyes widening with curiosity. A few more people pressed closer, and the Unsullied remained vigilant but did not strike at them. One man, an ironworker by the look of his soot-stained hands, stepped forward hesitantly. Your Grace, he said, stumbling over the words. We've lived under fear for years. The gold cloaks took what they wanted. The Lannisters did as they pleased, and we paid the price. If you say you'll be different, maybe we can hope for a better tomorrow. Daenerys set a hand gently on the man's shoulder, ignoring the grime that smeared her fingers. I will do all in my power to be the queen you deserve, not the one you fear. The small crowd exhaled collectively as though releasing years of pent-up dread. Some knelt, pressing their foreheads to the ground. Others reached out to her, murmuring thanks and blessings. Daenerys felt a stinging in her eyes. She recalled Astapor, Ukai, and Mirian, each city she had freed. She had walked through their streets as a liberator. Now she did the same in Westeros, fulfilling her destiny and forging a bond with the very people she sought to rule. Behind her, Drogon loomed, an imposing presence. But even he seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere, his posture relaxed. The ring of Unsullied parted to allow a path for the citizens to approach. Some still cowered, but more and more rose, lifting uncertain hands in praise or curiosity. Daenerys felt the moment crystallize in her heart. This was why she had crossed the sea, why she had risked everything. Not just for a crown, but for the chance to break the wheel of oppression. As the day wore on, Daenerys received reports from her commanders. The city's defenses had mostly crumbled after the Red Keep's destruction. The Lannister guards were disorganized and many had abandoned their posts. A few loyal pockets continued to fight in the streets, but the Dothraki and Unsullied pressed them back, capturing them or driving them deeper into hiding. Civilians flooded out of certain neighborhoods, forming chaotic lines of refugees near the gates. Tyrion worked tirelessly to restore order, dispatching word that surrender would be honored, while Missandei and other translators took up the message to quell fears. Amidst the swirl of battle's aftermath, Daenerys knew her greatest task was about to begin. Conquest was only the first step. Ruling justly would test her compassion and leadership in ways that even war had not. She climbed a broad staircase leading to a high vantage point near the city's central square, ignoring the debris and the acrid stench of ash. At the top, she could survey a sea of roofs and the milling throngs of newly freed people. "What do you see, my queen?" Yor's voice came from behind her. His armor was streaked with blood and soot, the scars of the day's conflict. But his gaze shone with unwavering devotion. Daenerys let her eyes roam over the expanse. A wounded city. Frightened. Confused. We have taken their queen's seat. Many will be grateful that Cersei is gone, but many will fear us or resent the destruction we've caused. Victories often come at a cost, Yora murmured. Yet no one can deny you. You have shown the realm your power. She nodded, trying to keep her emotions in check. Power was a tool, not a prize in itself. She needed to wield it carefully. In the distance, she spotted a group of Unsullied raising the Targaryen banner where once the Lion of Lannister had flown. The black and red sigil unfurled in the breeze as though the city were drawing its first breath under new rule. Daenerys felt a surge in her chest, a sense of destiny tempered by the knowledge that half the city still lay in fear. As dusk approached, Daenerys directed her forces to set up camps in the open squares and near the gates. Houses that had belonged to Lannister bannermen were commandeered for the war effort, though she insisted that no innocent family be cast out without care. She wanted to avoid needless cruelty, yet she also had to house and feed her armies. Beneath the low-hanging haze of smoke, torches and lanterns flickered, giving the city an otherworldly glow. She made her way to what was left of the Red Keep's outer walls. Much of the fortress was in shambles, but the lower courtyards remained somewhat intact. Stone walkways were littered with rubble, twisted iron, and the bodies of those who had fallen in defense of a doomed regime. The flicker of torchlight revealed the scorched remains of once grand tapestries and shattered suits of armor. It was a grim testament to the final hours of Lannister power. She passed under a half-collapsed archway guided by Grey Worm and a handful of Unsullied. Inside, the destruction was even more severe. Entire corridors had caved in, the once polished floors were blanketed with broken stone and ash. The stench of death, smothered by the smoke of fresh fires, lingered in every corner. Daenerys steeled herself, walking forward as if into a graveyard of a lost era. A faint scraping sound caught her attention. She signaled for silence and her guards froze. With cautious steps, she followed the noise down a corridor that ended in a fallen section of ceiling. Smoke curled through the air, making her eyes water. Then she saw it, a figure pinned beneath a heavy beam. Blonde hair matted with blood, regal clothes torn and stained with soot, and eyes wide with terror. It was Jaime Lannister. He looked up at her, his chest heaving with effort. His golden hand was trapped awkwardly under another chunk of debris. Blood oozed from a wound on his temple. "You," he managed to rasp, a crooked smile twisting his features. "Of course, it's you." Daenerys felt a jolt of emotion shoot through her. This was the Kingslayer, the man who had once killed her father to save King's Landing from wildfire. The same man who had been by Cersei's side through countless atrocities, but who, rumor said, had tried to do what was right in the end. Here he lay, broken and trapped in the rubble of the very fortress he had once guarded. She stepped closer, the flickering torchlight illuminating his pained expression. "You're alive," she said quietly, as if it were a surprising mercy in the midst of so much death. Jaime coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Barely. This place is coming down around me." His voice was laced with pain and resignation. Daenerys stood silent for a moment. A swirl of conflicting feelings rose in her chest. She had never forgotten that it was Jaime Lannister's sword that ended her father's life. Though she had not known Aerys too well, nor did she share his madness, the betrayal by a Kingsguard had always stung the Targaryen pride. Yet she also knew the story of how he had saved the city from the Mad King's plan to burn it all. Perhaps in another life, there would be more time to parse these moral complexities. She took in a steadying breath. "You need help," she said, her voice tight. To her surprise, Jaime shook his head, the faintest trace of a bitter laugh escaping him. "Help? Why would you show me mercy?" He winced, shifting painfully. "I was your father's killer. I stood beside Cersei while she orchestrated your death more times than I can count. And yet here you are." Daenerys gestured for Grey Worm and the others to lift the beam trapping Jaime's legs. With effort, they heaved it aside. Jaime cried out, but he was free. Daenerys knelt beside him, ignoring the grit biting into her knees. She thought of all the times she had shown mercy to those who had wronged her and all the times she had chosen fire instead. She had learned to weigh the cost of each decision carefully. "No one deserves to die pinned under a rock," she said at last. "Even my enemies." Jaime's eyes flickered with surprise, then he let out a wheezing laugh that turned into a cough. "I suppose that's not something I'd ever expect from a Targaryen." She pressed her lips into a line. "Times change. We must decide who we want to be in the world we're building." Carefully, she beckoned to one of her guards. "Get him out of here. If he can be saved, we'll see to it." Grey Worm frowned, but he obeyed. Two Unsullied gently lifted Jaime, supporting him under the arms. He gasped at the movement, his face contorting in agony. Daenerys rose, brushing the ash from her skirts, and looked down at him. "Tell me," she asked quietly, "where is Cersei?" A flicker of sorrow crossed his face. "I tried to get her out, before the flames, but the place was collapsing. I lost her in the chaos." He swallowed hard. "I don't know if she made it." Daenerys felt a pang of unexpected pity. She had come to topple the Lannisters, but she could not deny that Jaime was a man capable of love, twisted though that love might have been. She stepped back, letting her men carry him away. If Cersei yet lived, she would be found, and then there would be a reckoning. She continued deeper into the wreckage, each step a grim testimony to the final hours of the Lannister reign. Great columns had crashed down, walls were scorched black, tapestries reduced to ribbons of ash. Everywhere she looked, she saw the cost of war. Yet she also felt a glimmer of determination. With the destruction of the Red Keep, she had shattered the illusion of Lannister supremacy. The city would no longer bow to a cruel usurper. Now it must learn to bow to a new queen, a queen who promised to break the cycle of cruelty if only she could maintain her resolve. Emerging into a courtyard half-collapsed, Daenerys found Tyrion waiting. His face was grave, and she noticed dried blood on his brow as well. "I've found no sign of Cersei," he reported. "The tunnels beneath the keep have caved in. If she is trapped below, there's no way out." Daenerys looked at him for a long moment. They both carried complicated histories with that woman. Tyrion had once called Cersei his sister. He had endured her malice, her mocking, her attempts on his life. Yet Daenerys knew a brother's bond was not so easily severed by hatred alone. She reached out, placing a hand on Tyrion's arm. "Then it may be over," she said quietly. "We must turn our attention to the city. We've won the battle, but the real test begins now." Tyrion nodded, his expression a mask of worn resolve. "We'll need to secure the cooperation of the nobles. The city's resources are stretched thin. Hunger and disease will follow if we don't organize relief quickly." Daenerys breathed in the smoke-filled air, feeling the weight of leadership. "We'll call the lords who remain to the throne room, what's left of it. They must acknowledge me as Queen of the Seven Kingdoms or relinquish their titles." "The throne room may no longer be fit for such an audience," Tyrion pointed out. "Then find another hall, a courtyard, whatever still stands. The people must see their queen. They must see that we're not here just to kill and conquer." Together, they navigated back through the battered corridors until they reached a section of the keep's outer court that was still mostly intact. The high walls were scorched, but the pillars stood, and the open sky above let some fresh air swirl in to dispel the lingering smoke. This would be their makeshift seat of power until they could rebuild. Daenerys stood on the remnants of a wide dais where once a grand staircase might have led to the higher floors. Broken statuary surrounded them, jagged silhouettes in the twilight. She turned to her commanders and advisors who had gathered in her wake. Grey Worm was there, standing straight, always alert. Jorah leaned wearily on a broken marble banister, but his eyes never left her. Missandei approached, quill and parchment in hand, ready to take down proclamations. A scattering of Westerosi lords, those who had either pledged loyalty or been captured, loitered nervously at the edges. They stared at Daenerys with a mix of awe, fear, and grudging respect. Daenerys ascended the makeshift dais and lifted her voice to address them. Lords and ladies of Westeros, you see before you the end of a dynasty that ruled by fear and treachery. The Red Keep is in ruins. The Lannisters' cruel hold on the city is broken. I stand here not to subjugate you, but to offer a new beginning. I am Daenerys Storeborn of House Targaryen, mother of dragons, breaker of chains, and I claim the Iron Throne by right of blood and conquest. She paused, letting her voice echo across the open courtyard. The onlookers watched her carefully. Some knelt, others hesitated. Tyrion stood by her side, a living reminder that a Lannister could choose a different path. She continued, every word weighted with her vision for a better future. I have freed slaves in faraway cities. I have broken the grip of tyrants. I have commanded the might of dragons, yet I do not wish to rule through fear. Surrender your arms, swear fealty to me, and help me build a realm where no one must live under the heel of cruelty. Her words were met with a hush that stretched through the courtyard. One by one, the lords sank to their knees. Daenerys recognized some of their faces, minor lords who had once been sworn to House Tyrell or House Baratheon, remnants of shattered alliances. They looked up at her now, compelled by the demonstration of power they had witnessed that morning and perhaps sparked by a glimmer of hope in her speech. I pledge my house to you, Queen Daenerys, intoned Lord Redwine, who had supported her earlier. He bowed deeply, setting an example for others to follow. A gaunt lord from the Crownlands, his voice shaking, followed suit. In the Na. Me of my ancestors, I bend the knee. My men will serve at your command. A ripple of acceptance moved through the crowd. Daenerys felt a surge of relief mingle with the ever-present tension in her chest. This was the moment she had dreamed of, the rightful return to Westeros, the restoration of House Targaryen. Yet this was only the beginning. She would have to rule fairly to bring peace to a land ravaged by war. She had to quell the resentment that might linger and prove that her brand of conquest was not another turning of the same cruel wheel. After the declarations were made, Daenerys dismissed the lords to tend to their holdings. She appointed new wardens over certain areas to manage the distribution of food and supplies, emphasizing that no one, especially not the innocent, should starve because of this war. Missandei recorded each appointment, while Tyrion and Yora offered advice on who could be trusted. By the time darkness fully enveloped the city, the fires in the Red Keep had largely died down. The night sky glowed with embers, and the husk of the once great fortress loomed as a jagged silhouette against the moon. Daenerys took a moment to walk the parapets that still remained near the main gate, her cloak fluttering behind her in the cool breeze. From this vantage, she could see both the battered city below and the open ocean beyond. She was struck by the enormity of the task ahead. How do you feel? Tyrion asked quietly, coming to stand beside her. She inhaled slowly, the night air relief from the day's smoke. Torn, she admitted. I know it had to be done. The Red Keep was Cersei's stronghold, a symbol of her power. By destroying it, we saved the city from a prolonged siege. Yet I mourn the cost, the fear in the people's eyes, the blood spilled. Tyrion nodded, gaze distant. Symbols matter. Today you destroyed one. Now you must replace it with a vision that unites people. Daenerys turned to him, noticing the lines of weariness in his face. And do you still believe I can? His brow furrowed, but there was the faintest smile at the corners of his mouth. I do, he said with quiet conviction. I've seen you free the oppressed before. You never lost sight of why you fought. As long as you hold on to that, you can succeed. She rested her hands on the cold stone of the parapet, gazing down at the city. The flickering torches below revealed the shapes of her soldiers patrolling the streets, the newly kneeling lords hurrying about their tasks, and the common folk who emerged slowly, uncertainly, from the rubble of the day. In the distance, she could see the broken towers of the Red Keep, an eerie reminder of her father's final madness and the Lannisters' rise to power. It was gone now, consumed by dragonfire. Yes, a new symbol was needed, one of justice, unity, and rebirth. She recalled the words she had spoken to the small folk in Meereen, how she had promised them a future without chains. Westeros was different in some ways, but people were people everywhere, craving the same dignity, safety, and hope. The dawn would bring fresh challenges, but also an opportunity to shape the realm according to her ideals. Tyrion cleared his throat. We should rest, Your Grace. Tomorrow, we begin the real work of rebuilding. The city will look to you for answers. She nodded. I'll rest, Tyrion. But first, I want to see my dragons. Make sure they're safely roosting. With a polite bow, Tyrion excused himself, leaving her to descend the stone steps alone. She found Drogon, Regal, and Viserion curled in a wide courtyard not far from the keep's shattered gates. Soldiers and camp followers maintained a cautious distance in awe of the beast's size and power. The dragons sensed her approach, lifting their massive heads and thumping their tails in acknowledgement. Daenerys walked among them, brushing a hand gently along Drogon's warm flank. He huffed, smoke curling from his nostrils. She lingered there, feeling the solidity of the dragons beneath her palms, remembering the hatchlings they once were. So small, so vulnerable. Now they were unstoppable forces of nature, forging the path for her rule. Yet she knew they could be as destructive as they were magnificent. She needed their fire to break the tyranny of the Lannisters, but now she must guide them to protect the realm, not terrorize it. Rest eventually found her in the small hours of the morning after she ensured that wounded soldiers were cared for, that the city's gates were secured against looting, and that emissaries had been dispatched to the neighboring regions. She slept under the stars, refusing to take shelter in the ruined keep. Dawn brought the crowing of cocks and the distant murmur of thousands of waking souls. The next days blurred into a cautious dance of governance. Daenerys convened her new advisors and the lords who had bent the knee, establishing councils to address the city's most urgent needs: food, water, shelter, and order. The smoldering wreck of the Red Keep was declared off-limits for now as the structure was unstable. Rumors swirled that Cersei's body might lie hidden in the debris or that she had escaped. Nobody knew for sure. Jaime's injuries were tended to by the best healers Daenerys had at her disposal. He hovered between life and death for days, slipping in and out of feverish delirium. When he was conscious, he spoke little, his eyes far away as though haunted by ghosts of regret. Tyrion visited him often but said little of what passed between them. Daenerys allowed it, uncertain whether Jaime was friend or foe, yet willing to show him a mercy that might foster unity in the fragile peace she was attempting to build. Word of the Red Keep's fiery destruction traveled faster than ravens. Soon, lords from all corners of the Seven Kingdoms were arriving or sending envoys. Many came out of fear, driven by the knowledge that the Mother of Dragons was no myth but a queen who would burn the strongholds of those who defied her. Others came out of hope, believing her promises of a more just realm. The arrival of fresh faces brought new power struggles, alliances, and negotiations. Daenerys faced them all with a steeled heart. She remembered her vow: she was not here to repeat the madness of her father or the tyranny of the Lannisters. She was here to reshape the world. Some lords balked at her demands for fair taxes and the abolition of practices that verged on slavery, like the harsh indentures of certain southern lands. But Daenerys stood firm. She had not crossed the sea to perpetuate the same old injustices. Meanwhile, food shortages in King's Landing became acute. The war had disrupted trade routes and farmland. Daenerys used her fleet to bring in supplies from surrounding regions, carefully negotiating deals with those who offered grain and livestock. Bit by bit, the city stirred to life, shops reopening, wagons rolling in, and blackened rubble swept aside. The Red Keep, however, remained a silent testament on the hill, a fortress-sized scar that overshadowed the city's daily routines. On a late afternoon 3 weeks after the fall of the keep, Daenerys stood in what remained of the throne room, surveying the devastation. Rubble was piled where the grand columns had once soared, the floor cracked and scorched. She stepped carefully around a jagged chunk of masonry. The Iron Throne, if it survived at all, lay buried under collapsed arches and stone. The Targaryen sigil she had once dreamed of restoring here was blackened by soot. Yet she did not weep for it. The throne had been forged by the fires of a conquering dragon, and it had witnessed centuries of bloodshed. She wondered if it was a symbol worth preserving, or if it was just another link in the chain she meant to break. She turned to find Tyrion standing behind her, his hands clasped, his expression thoughtful. "It seems that seed has been lost," he said quietly, nodding to the pile of rubble where the throne had once stood. "Some say it was cursed by the blades of 1,000 enemies." Daenerys tilted her head, pondering. It might be for the best. That throne was a symbol of conquest. Perhaps a new seat should be built for a new age. Tyrion smiled faintly. Practical. And symbolic. They left the broken throne room, walking side by side through the battered corridors. A sudden commotion outside drew their attention, shouts and the sound of fast-approaching footsteps. Emerging into the open courtyard, they saw a group of soldiers escorting a ragged figure, face hidden by a hood. The soldiers parted, revealing a woman whose blonde hair spilled out as the hood was yanked back. Her clothes were torn, her face smeared with dirt, but her blue eyes blazed with hatred and desperation. Cersei Lannister, alive. Daenerys' heart pounded in her chest. Tyrion inhaled sharply, his eyes darting between his sister and his queen. The guards forced Cersei to her knees before Daenerys, pressing a sword to her back. Cersei spat, defiant even in chains. "So the Targaryen whore has burned my city," she hissed, her voice raw from thirst and exhaustion. "And come to gloat, has she?" Daenerys looked down at the woman who had caused her so much pain, the one who had stolen her throne, killed her allies, and threatened everything Daenerys held dear. She took a step closer, feeling the tension radiate from Tyrion and the guards alike. "Where did you find her?" Daenerys asked quietly, addressing the soldiers. One of them, a captain with a lined face, saluted. "She was caught trying to slip out through a hidden exit near the docks, Your Grace. Dressed as a commoner, but the gold in her satchel gave her away." Daenerys nodded, her eyes never leaving Cersei's face. She saw the hatred and fear there, the coiled rage of a cornered animal. Yet she also saw the vestiges of a woman who had ruled through cruelty and manipulation, who had played a dangerous game and lost. This was the last Lannister queen, brought to her knees. Cersei sneered. "Do what you must. You'll never be loved. You'll only be feared as your father was." Her words stung, but Daenerys refused to let them find purchase. She thought of the children she had seen in the city, the newly hopeful faces, and the lords who had bent the knee. "You're wrong," she said in a voice as cold as winter. "I have a vision for this realm that goes beyond your narrow illusions of power." Cersei laughed harshly. "Spare me your speeches. You destroyed your own legacy by burning the Red Keep. This city will never forgive you." Tyrion stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Cersei, enough. You've lost. Haven't we had enough bloodshed?" She turned her furious gaze upon her brother. "Tyrion, the traitor. How fitting that you stand by the Dragon Queen while I rot in chains." Daenerys raised a hand to silence her. The courtyard fell still. Everyone waited for the queen to pronounce judgment. A swirl of emotion coursed through Daenerys. She remembered the heartbreak of losing allies, the agony of betrayal, and the terror that Cersei had inflicted on countless people. This was not a petty thirst for vengeance. It was justice, swift and final. Yet she had a choice to make, one that would define her reign in the eyes of all who watched. She drew a breath, heart hammering. "Cersei of House Lannister, you sought to destroy me and keep the realm in chains of fear. You spilled innocent blood, betrayed your allies, and refused every chance at peace. For your crimes against the realm, I could have you executed on the spot." A hush fell. She could sense the fear in Cersei's eyes, despite her defiance. Tyrion stared at Daenerys, perhaps hoping for a merciful stroke. The guards stood ready, swords half drawn. Daenerys' voice rang clear in the courtyard. "But I am not my father. Nor am I you. My wish is to break the cycles of hatred and cruelty that have plagued this kingdom. Thus, I offer you a chance to stand trial before the realm you wronged. If found guilty by a fair tribunal, you will face the consequences. Your life hangs in the balance of justice, not vengeance." Shocked whispers spread among the onlookers. Even Cersei seemed momentarily taken aback. Tyrion let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Daenerys signaled to the guards. "Take her away. Ensure she is watched carefully." Cersei opened her mouth to spew more venom, but the guards hauled her to her feet and dragged her off before she could utter another word. Tyrion gave Daenerys a sidelong glance, mingled respect and caution in his eyes. "That was unexpected," he said quietly. Daenerys nodded, her gaze turning to the rubble of the keep. "Westeros needs to see that I bring justice, not terror. If I simply kill her now, I become the monster they feared. Let her stand trial. Let the realm witness that the wheel can indeed be broken." She left the courtyard, the eyes of soldiers and bystanders following her every step. Word would travel swiftly. The Dragon Queen had captured Cersei Lannister and shown her mercy, if only the mercy of a fair trial. Some would see it as a sign of strength, others as a weakness. Daenerys no longer cared. She was determined to forge a new path, one free of the endless cycles of revenge that had scarred these lands for too long. That night, she stood by the bay once more, watching the moonlight dance on the waters where her ships still bobbed. Casterly Rock, Highgarden, and other seats of power would soon learn of her victory. Allies would flock to her banner, or enemies would gather in the shadows. The weight of the crown pressed down upon her, yet she felt a sense of conviction. She had chosen the path of fire, burning away the old regime, but she would temper that fire with compassion and justice. The dragon within her had raged at the Red Keep, yet the queen in her would strive to shape a better tomorrow. Thus, Daenerys Targaryen began her reign, standing on the ashes of the dynasty that had once undone her family, forging a new destiny from the embers. And in that moment, she was neither conqueror nor savior, but something in between, a queen who bore the scars of her own battles and carried the hopes of a realm aching for peace. The night wind carried the distant sound of waves, mingling with the distant roars of dragons. The future stretched before her, uncertain yet uncharted, lit by the promise of a new dawn. Daenerys woke early the next morning, well before the city's daily clamor began. She stood on the battlements of the ruined outer ward of the Red Keep, gazing out over King's Landing as soft light slid across shattered roofs and wounded streets. Slivers of pale sky, streaked with hints of rose and gold, offered a hush of new possibilities. In that dawning stillness, she drew in a breath and centered herself. She thought of her father and the destructive legacy he'd left behind. She thought of her dragons, dozing now after their nighttime flights, each a living reminder that fire could be a tool of renewal, but only if wielded with discipline and compassion. Once the sun rose fully, the city would erupt into another day of rebuilding, questioning, waiting. Rumor chased rumor through the alleys. The small folk were still wary, though many realized they had not been slaughtered or starved as so many conquerors of old might have done. The Targaryen banners flown throughout King's Landing presented a sign that her reign had begun. But Daenerys knew that acceptance could be as fragile as spun glass. One cruelty, one misstep might turn hope to hatred. She had to be careful. She left the wall behind, walking along a blackened corridor that was once part of the keep's outer apartments. In the confusion of the assault, the entire southwestern side had collapsed in a tumble of stone and wood, but a stretch of hallway still stood, open to the air on one side where half of the wall had fallen away. She stepped around broken arches, past scorched tapestries that fluttered in the morning breeze, until she reached a makeshift council space, a small courtyard that had survived better than most of the keep. There, Tyrion waited at a table weighed down by scrolls. His hair looked slightly more silver in the morning light, and dust smudged his face. "You're up early," he said by way of greeting, glancing up from a piece of parchment. "There's little rest for us these days." Daenerys nodded. "Any news from the lords you summoned?" Tyrion tapped the scroll. "Lord Royce and a handful of knights from the Vale arrived at the city gates last night, requesting an audience. They bring no immediate threat so far as our scouts can tell. Likely they want to see for themselves if the stories of the Mad King's daughter are true, or if there's a more measured queen sitting on the rubble of the Red Keep. They'll find me," Daenerys said, "and the realm I intend to shape." "What of the north?" A small tension flickered in Tyrion's gaze. "No ravens from Winterfell of late. If Jon Snow is still king in the north, we've yet to hear his decision about your claim. It's possible the north is biding its time, watching what happens here before pledging any fealty." Daenerys wondered about the rumors. How many times had she heard the name Stark invoked since she'd landed in Westeros? The north had always been distant, proud, quick to guard itself. The watchers in the north might wait a long while yet, but she could not. King's Landing required her full attention. The city starved under Lannister misrule, and chaos was only half-tamed by her presence. "And the Riverlands?" she asked quietly, crossing her arms. Tyrion exhaled. "Some of the Tully banners are stirring again now that the Freys have lost power. Edmure Tully is rumored to have retaken Riverrun, though the lines of inheritance and rightful rulership are tangled after so many wars. Few are ready to march on your behalf yet, but they're not opposed to a Targaryen queen. They remember Aerys' madness, but they also recall the injustices of the Freys and Lannisters. We'll have to earn their trust," Daenerys said. "First we mend King's Landing, then we extend our hand to the rest of the realm." Her voice cooled. "And Cersei remains in custody, awaiting trial. Do the people know?" Tyrion inclined his head. "It's the talk of every alley and corner. Some say it's a sign of your weakness that you haven't simply beheaded her and sent her head north as a warning. Others call it the dawn of true justice. They're eager, in their way, to see if Cersei actually stands before some sort of tribunal." Daenerys let her gaze travel over the broken courtyard. "She will. I promised a fair trial. She'll have it. And if she's found guilty, her fate is sealed." She saw Tyrion's expression flicker, the conflict in his eyes. She offered no further reassurance, and he did not ask for any. He knew well how this realm had suffered under her prisoner's rule. Grey Worm arrived then, saluting with a crisp nod. "Your Grace." A column of wagons arrived at dawn, from the Rosby Road. "Food, mainly. We have seized it for distribution to the city." "Seized?" she echoed, narrowing her eyes. He hesitated. "It carried the Lannister sigil. The drivers admitted they served Lannister bannermen. In a normal time, they might have brought their goods to the city markets, but they were uncertain of new laws. So we took the wagons to storehouses for rationing." Daenerys gave a slow nod. "Ensure the drivers are paid fairly for their cargo, some token of coin or promise of future contract. They are not our enemies if they've come to trade. We do not steal from small folk. Grey Worm bowed, though the concept of compensation for conquered enemies still felt alien to him. Yes, your grace. She accepted a AF of papers he handed over, a ledger of how many wagons had arrived, how much grain each carried. The small note scrawled at the bottom indicated that some of these caravans had once delivered exclusively to the Red Keep's granaries, all under the Lannister banner. Now those same drivers approached the Targaryen-occupied capital uncertainly, not sure whether they'd be turned away or put to the sword. Daenerys wanted to make clear that her reign was different. When Grey Worm departed, Tyrion drew a shaky breath. Every gesture you make, from how you pay for grain to how you treat prisoners, echoes across the realm. We'll need more than good intentions to unite these 7 kingdoms. Daenerys set the ledger aside. I know. We'll show them in deeds and laws. I want them to see that a Targaryen queen keeps her word. She glanced around the courtyard, checking that no one else was close enough to overhear. Has your brother awakened? Tyrion's face tensed. Briefly, he's weakened. The healers say his leg might have been permanently damaged by that beam. His head wound is severe. It's possible he'll never be the fighter he was. He spoke a few times, nonsense mostly. He asked about Cersei, but was in too much pain for me to answer. Daenerys's voice lowered. I offered him mercy because he was trapped under the rubble. But that doesn't change his past sins, nor does it absolve him of all he did alongside Cersei. Still, I want no harm to come to him now. Not until we know his mind. Tyrion dipped his head. I'll watch over him as best I can. Thank you. They fell silent. In the distance, dawn gave way to full morning, and King's Landing rose to face another day under new rule. Within the hour, Daenerys was walking the streets, guarded by 4 unsullied on foot and a small retinue of Dothraki outriders. She wore light armor over a fitted black tunic, the 3-headed dragon sigil on her chest. On her shoulders, a cloak pinned with a silver brooch glinted in the sun. Though the Red Keep lay in ruins, people called it the Queen City now, or the Dragon City, or simply the Targaryen City. The small folk stared wide-eyed as she passed, many uncertain whether to run or bow. Some offered awkward gestures of respect. A mother curtsied, her toddler clinging to her skirts. A fisherman bent low, the smell of brine clinging to his clothes. Daenerys halted at a large square near a row of burned-out shops. Workers toiled among the charred beams, salvaging what they could. When she approached, they paused, their faces a mix of curiosity and anxiety. The Dragon Queen in person was an unsettling sight, for tales of dragonfire preceded her, but she meant to reassure them. Are you from these shops? She asked a soot-stained man who stood, cloth mask around his neck, eyes tired from labor. Yes, your grace. They were once ours, but the looting and the fires, it's all gone now. He gestured around. We're trying to recover what we can. Daenerys studied the wreckage. She recalled how, after she liberated cities in Essos, the local economy struggled to stand on its feet. I will see to it that you're given new timber, stone, and any help we can spare. The city must be rebuilt. If you pledge loyalty to the crown, you'll receive fair treatment under my rule. The man's eyes widened. Thank you, your grace. We will do as you command. He hesitated, clearly wanting to speak but afraid. She nodded. Speak freely. I do not punish honest words. He mustered his courage. We've heard rumors that you destroyed the keep and killed many Lannisters. My nephew was in the Lannister Guard. He's missing. I don't expect pity, but do you know if there's a place for men like him? Guards who served Cersei. Her chest tightened. We did fight them in the keep. Many died, some fled, others surrendered. Some remain in hiding or have come forward to pledge their swords to me, seeking amnesty. If your nephew still lives, he can come forth, lay down his arms, and swear fealty. I'll not punish him for obeying old loyalties, so long as he ceases to fight us now. Tears pricked the man's eyes. He bowed his head. Thank you, my queen. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder for the briefest moment before turning to continue down the street. The Dothraki who guarded her glanced at each other, impressed, if slightly confused, by the gentleness in her approach. Grey Worm had once told them all that the queen was fierce as a storm at sea. Now they saw she could be calm as a quiet morning. Yet the quiet morning could still hold an undertone of thunder. Moving deeper into the city, she reached the wide thoroughfare that led to the Great September of Baelor. That structure had been destroyed some time before. Cersei's wildfire plot saw to it, but the steps and partial dome remained like a carcass of grand faith undone. Further along, merchants had pitched new tents, selling bread, fish, and produce from the countryside. Already, the city's lifeblood was returning. Haggling, trade, the frantic bustle of daily survival. At one stall, an old woman sold small clay amulets in the shape of a dragon. Daenerys paused to examine them. They were crudely made, lumps of clay with ridges for wings. She lifted one, turning it over in her hand. "What are these?" she asked softly. The woman bowed, her frame trembling with age. "Good fortune charms, your grace. To honor the return of House Targaryen, we shape the clay, say a blessing. Wear it around your neck for protection, or keep it in your pocket." Daenerys managed a small smile. "Do many people believe in these blessings?" A younger girl, perhaps the woman's granddaughter, nodded eagerly. "We sell more each day. People think if they honor the dragons, maybe they won't be burned. Or maybe they'll be given a second chance. The city has known fear for so long. Maybe we all just want some hope." Daenerys pressed a coin into the girl's palm. "Let me buy one, then." "I could use hope as much as anyone." She slipped the clay charm into her pouch. She departed the stalls to find that a small crowd had begun trailing her, curious onlookers who whispered excitedly to each other. Some of them saw her kindness with the old woman, the carpenters, the shopkeepers. A few knelt, but she gestured for them to rise. "I prefer you stand," she said simply. "I want you to walk beside me, not tremble at my feet." After an hour among the people, Daenerys returned to the Red Keep's outer courtyard, what was left of it. Tyrion awaited her, along with Missandei, who carried messages from the city gates. "Word has arrived from the Vale contingent," Missandei explained. "They request an audience and bring letters from Lady Sansa Stark of Winterfell." Tyrion's eyebrows shot upward. "Lady Sansa? So the North stirs, after all." Daenerys motioned for them to proceed, stepping over to a low bench where a broken column stood behind her like a bleak backdrop of history. She extended a hand to Missandei, who gave her a sealed parchment. The wax bore the imprint of a wolf's head, House Stark's sigil. With delicate care, Daenerys broke the seal and began to read. The letter was brief and formal. Sansa Stark wrote on behalf of the North, acknowledging the rumors of Daenerys' arrival and her conquest of King's Landing. She expressed neither hostility nor immediate allegiance, but spoke of caution, especially regarding the memory of how House Targaryen had once ruled. She invited Daenerys to send a northern envoy or to come north in peace if negotiations were needed. There was no open acceptance, but also no open rejection. A carefully measured stance. Daenerys handed the parchment to Tyrion. "She's treading carefully, that's plain enough." Tyrion scanned it quickly, giving a low hum of assent. "Sansa learned politics in a harsh court. She won't pledge the North to you just because the Lannisters fell." He glanced at Daenerys. "But it's not a refusal either. That's more than we might have expected." Daenerys considered. "We must stabilize the capital first. Then, when the time is right, perhaps we'll send a delegation north." She paused. "If the Vale Lords are here, we can learn more about Sansa's intentions from them. Let them come." Not long after, knights from the Vale were admitted through the charred gates. Their leader was a middle-aged man with iron-gray hair and a precisely trimmed beard. He introduced himself as Ser Roderick Royce. Behind him stood three more, each bearing the sigil of House Royce, House Grafton, or House Harding. They bowed stiffly to Daenerys, though they looked around at the ruined courtyard with open astonishment. "Your Grace," Ser Roderick began, "we come on behalf of Lady Sansa Stark, who has assumed rule of the North and allied with the Vale. The Aerie stands behind her, as does much of the old northern nobility. We've heard that you took King's Landing from the Lannisters and that your dragons ended their reign." Daenerys inclined her head. "I did. The city is mine, and I mean to rule it justly." Tyrion stepped forward. "Ser Roderick, I'm Tyrion Lannister, Hand of the Queen. You mentioned the North and the Vale Alliance. Do you bring any official message beyond Lady Sansa's letter?" The knight's gaze flicked to Tyrion with something like curiosity and wariness. Only that the Vale does not seek open conflict. We support Lady Sansa's decision to wait and watch. We do know that a common threat lurks in the north, rumors of the Night King and an army of the dead. Hard to separate truth from rumor, but many in the Vale take it seriously enough to keep our swords at the ready. Daenerys frowned. She'd heard scraps of these rumors back in Essos, whispers of undead horrors beyond the wall. At the time, she assumed them to be tall tales. Now, her expression became guarded. I've heard mention of these creatures, but so far, I see no living dead in King's Landing. There's enough trouble here in the realm of the living. Ser Roderick gave a curt nod, and Lady Sansa understands that as well, which is why we do not demand your presence in the north. We only caution that if these nightmares prove real, all of Westeros may be imperiled. No throne will matter if the realm is overrun. Daenerys glanced at Tyrion, whose face betrayed thoughtful concern. We'll keep the Vale's warning in mind, she said. For now, the best response is to stabilize the south so we can address any threat from the north if it arises. The Vale Knights acknowledged this. As they took their leave, Daenerys felt the stir of more questions. Could there truly be an army of the dead? It seemed as fanciful as any story about dragons once had been. But her life was built upon what others once deemed impossible. She made a mental note to question her own advisors, particularly Yora, who'd traveled widely, or Missandei, who had heard so many rumors from across the seas. Knowledge was power, and if a new threat loomed at the edge of reason, she'd best prepare for it. That afternoon, Daenerys convened a gathering in a half-collapsed courtyard that served as her great hall by necessity. The dais was a hastily constructed wooden platform, the battered walls soared on either side, open to the sky. People crowded around, newly kneeling lords, city merchants, visiting knights from the Vale, and travelers curious to witness the Targaryen queen who had toppled House Lannister. At the front stood Tyrion, Missandei, Grey Worm, Yora, and a line of Unsullied in formal stance. In a clear voice, Daenerys began, "Hear me, people of King's Landing and lords of Westeros. Our city is wounded but not broken. Our people are weary but not lost. We will rebuild. I have heard stories of your hunger, your uncertainty. I promise you this. So long as I reign, I will strive to feed the hungry, to shelter those who lost their homes, and to punish those who rob or harm the innocent. I invite honest trade, fair dealings, and I pledge to treat each house and each region with respect, so long as they do the same to us." Some in the gathering murmured, exchanging glances. Others stood silent, measuring the truth of her words. Daenerys continued, "In the days ahead, we will begin public works projects to restore the city's walls and rebuild homes destroyed in the battle. Each able-bodied resident who chooses to work will be paid a fair wage. In return, I ask for your loyalty, your oath to keep the peace. Treachery will not be tolerated. We have suffered enough war." A hush spread, and then a wave of voices rose. Tentative cheers, applause, and murmured approval. Not universal, but a start. Daenerys saw hope flicker in some eyes, fear in others, a guarded acceptance in most. This was her realm now. She bowed her head in acknowledgement of their response before stepping down from the dais. As the assembly dispersed, Tyrion touched her arm lightly. "It's a strong start. They'll be watching to see if actions match words." Daenerys offered a faint smile, tinged with the weight of all that lay ahead. "They will match. I promise you that." 2 days later, the morning dawned grim with rain. It ran in rivulets across the broken stones of the Red Keep's courtyard, collecting in puddles that reflected the dark sky overhead. Daenerys stood beneath a makeshift awning, listening to the patter of water. She wore a heavy cloak to keep dry, though droplets still clung to her hair. Missandei approached with a message. "Your Grace, the merchants from Dorne have arrived. They claim to be envoys from House Martell's new leadership." Daenerys' eyebrows rose in interest. "There's new leadership in Dorne? I'd heard Illyria Sand had taken control after Prince Doran and his heirs were killed, but that ended in strife." Missandei nodded. "Yes. Word is that House Martell has distant cousins who rallied the Dornish houses to depose Illyria Sand. This merchant says that a man named Kono Martell, a nephew of the late Prince Doran through a cousin's line, is recognized as the current Prince of Dorne. They have proposals to trade in King's Landing and to discuss an alliance." Daenerys recalled how Dorne had once thrown its support behind her. Illyria and the Sand Snakes had allied with Olenna Tyrell, but that alliance had been undone by the Lannisters. The details were messy. Still, if Dorne was extending a hand, it was worth meeting. Show them in. Let's see what they have to say. Moments later, 2 Dornish merchants emerged from the drizzle. Both dressed in finely woven cloaks dyed in shades of gold and orange. Their faces were tanned, their beards neatly trimmed. They bowed gracefully before Daenerys, then introduced themselves as Javi and Mors, humble traders acting under the auspices of Prince Kono Martell. Javi, the older of the pair, spoke with clear, polished diction. "Your Grace, we hail from Sunspear with greetings from Prince Kono. Dorne has heard rumors of your triumph over the Lannisters, a house that once took from us our beloved Elia Martell and later ravaged our lands. We come hoping for a renewal of the alliance once promised to the Targaryen cause." Daenerys nodded. "I remember how Prince Dorne once harbored hopes of wedding my family to his, a plan that died with those who conspired to keep us apart. If Dorne truly wants an alliance, I'm prepared to listen." The second merchant, Mors, spoke. "Our prince is cautious. He wishes to see you remain in control of King's Landing for more than just a few weeks before committing fully. But if you do indeed hold the city, if your rule proves just, Dorne will stand with you. We have little love for the Iron Throne, historically, but with the Lannisters' downfall, times have changed." The tension in Daenerys' shoulders eased somewhat. Dorne's support would help restore stability to Westeros. The Reach is in flux, the Stormlands like a clear lord, and the Crownlands have been ravaged by war. If Dorne stands beside me, we might unify the South. Trade, prosperity, peace, that is what I seek. Javi and Mors exchanged a glance. "Then, Your Grace, we will convey your words to Prince Kono. We also bring a token of goodwill, crates of Dornish wine, fruit, and spices. We hope it pleases you." Daenerys offered a courteous smile. "You have my thanks. We'll uncork a cask tonight and toast to friendship." They departed, leaving Daenerys and Missandei with the promise of at least one region open to new alliances. Tyrion soon arrived, drenched from the rain. "Saw the Dornish in the courtyard," he said. They were leaving with bright expressions. "Good news." Daenerys recounted the conversation. Tyrion rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "Yes, that might bode well. If we secure Dorne's trade routes, we'll have an influx of resources and fewer potential enemies at our back. House Martell was always proud. If they're truly open to forging this bond, it's a major step." "Let's hope so," Daenerys said, glancing at the rain that hammered the courtyard. "For now, we can't rely on hope alone. There's another matter, Cersei. I've decided it's time to move forward with her trial." Tyrion's expression turned pained. "You're certain you want to begin now? The city is still settling. Any trial of Cersei will draw enormous crowds and strong emotions. People might riot, especially Lannister loyalists." Daenerys lifted her chin. "I cannot wait too long. The rumors grow every day. Some say I torture her, others say I keep her in luxury. If I truly believe in justice, I must show it. Her crimes are known. We'll assemble a tribunal. If she is found guilty, we'll see justice done. If she's not, well, I won't pretend that's likely." Tyrion hesitated. "You'll need to choose the judges carefully. Even a farce of a trial would undermine your message of fairness if it appears rigged." She gave him a long look. "That's exactly why I need you to help organize it. We'll find 3 parties, one from the crown, one from among the lords who recently pledged to me, and one from somewhere else to prove impartiality. Perhaps the faith, if they still hold any moral authority after the destruction of the September." A ghost of a smile crossed Tyrion's lips. "You take quite a risk, trusting the faith to remain neutral. But yes, it could help quell public outcry. Let me see who among their number remains respected enough to serve. No more High Sparrow, obviously. But certain septons survived, and at least 1 or 2 might be accepted by the people." "Do so," Daenerys said, "and ensure Jaime is stable. If he's able to testify, that could shed light on her crimes. Though I doubt he'd damn his sister even now." Tyrion's features were tight. "You underestimate the bitterness that can grow between them, especially after all they've endured. But it's true, I can't guess how he'll act." They parted in the drizzle, leaving Daenerys to her thoughts. She walked through the keep's halls, those that were still passable, her boots splashing in shallow puddles. Rain dripped from shattered ceilings. Memories of that fiery day still haunted her. She sometimes heard the echoes of scorpion bolts whistling past, or the roar of collapsing towers, or felt the searing heat of dragonfire on her cheeks. She pushed the recollection aside. She had to focus on what lay ahead. By noon, the rain had faded to a soft mist. Grey worms sought her out to report that a portion of the city's gates had been reinforced, reducing the threat of brigands slipping in. The Dothraki patrolled outside the walls, ensuring roving bandits stayed clear. The Targaryen hold on King's Landing was solidifying, albeit slowly. Late that evening, Daenerys found herself in a small chamber in what used to be the Red Keep's administrative wing. Its roof was cracked but still held out most of the weather and tea. Irian had set up a modest table with chairs. A single lantern glowed. They shared a dinner of bread, dried fruits, and a bit of roasted fish. The day's trials weighed heavily on both of them. "We have the names for the tribunal," Tyrion said, sipping from a cup of Dornish wine. "You as queen, of course, though you might wish to act in a more ceremonial role. Then there's Lord Redwine, who swore loyalty to you. And we've found a Septon Maribald, widely respected among the poor. He'd served in the Riverlands for years, caring for war victims. He's not well known in the city, but he has the faith's blessing." Daenerys studied him. "I'll stand as one judge, not merely a figurehead. Cersei's crimes include attempted murder of me, so some might say I'm biased, but the realm needs to see that I'm not afraid to weigh the truth openly. Lord Redwine can speak to the damage Cersei did to the Reach, and Septon Maribald will represent the moral authority of the faith. It sounds balanced, or at least as balanced as we can manage. Cersei will need some manner of defense, or it won't appear fair," Tyrion added quietly. "Even the worst criminals have the right to speak in their own favor." Daenerys paused. "She can speak for herself if she wishes. Or if you think it wise, she can have an advocate. But who would defend her now?" Tyrion's lips tightened. "I doubt any of her once loyal advisors remain. Qyburn is dead and the Kettleblacks vanished. The last time I saw her champion was the undead Ser Gregor, and he's gone. She might stand alone, or perhaps Jaime might attempt to speak for her. But given his injuries and his uncertain loyalty, it's an open question." Daenerys swirled the wine in her cup. "Let her choose. Tomorrow, we'll send word that the tribunal convenes in 3 days' time in the courtyard we use as a hall. We'll ensure the city can witness it within reason. I want no illusions that we're hiding this away." Tyrion set down his cup. "Do you anticipate an uprising? Some Lannister loyalists might try to free her." A grim line formed on Daenerys' lips. "We'll post extra unsullied around the perimeter and the stands. If there is a plot, let them come. We'll show them that the age of Lannister intimidation is over." So it was that, 3 days later, King's Landing saw the strangest spectacle it had beheld since the day Daenerys' dragons burned the Red Keep. A hastily erected dais stood at one end of a broad courtyard that had once hosted tourney festivities. Now, the ground was uneven, partly turned to mud. Yet a large crowd gathered, commoners, knights, merchants, lords. All had come to see whether the queen who promised justice would indeed deliver it. At midday, trumpets sounded a short, solemn note. Daenerys arrived, cloaked in black and red, her silver gold hair braided back. She climbed the dais, flanked by 2 unsullied guards who carried no banners, only tall spears. A hush fell over the crowd. Lord Redwine, a balding man of serious demeanor, followed and stood to her left. On her right was Septon Maribald, a kindly-faced man with worn robes whose presence seemed to calm the uneasy watchers. Cersei Lannister was brought forth in chains. Even the roaring throng drew quiet at her appearance. She wore a rough gray shift and a thin cloak. Her hair, once meticulously styled, hung limp about her shoulders. Her cheeks were hollow, her eyes bloodshot, as though she'd slept little. Yet she walked with her head high, projecting defiance. Guards locked her chains to a metal ring set into the platform. Daenerys stood. The hush deepened until she could almost hear her own heartbeat. This moment felt strangely surreal. Cersei, the infamous queen of the 7 kingdoms, reduced to a prisoner in a courtyard of shattered stone. Daenerys let a breath fill her lungs. Then she spoke, her voice carrying over the crowd. "Cersei of House Lannister, you stand accused of high treason against the rightful crown of Westeros, which is now vested in House Targaryen. You conspired to kill me, Daenerys Stormborn, and you unleashed cruelty upon the city and the realm. You stand accused of murder, of using wildfire against your enemies and your own people, of betraying alliances made in good faith, and of myriad crimes in the name of power. Today, we convene a tribunal to weigh these charges. I, Daenerys Targaryen, will judge. Lord Redwine will judge. Septon Maribald will judge. Do you understand these charges?" Cersei's lips curled. "I understand that I am at the mercy of a usurper whore who burned my home and murdered my soldiers." A hiss of anger rippled through the crowd. Some spat on the ground at her words, while others looked on in uneasy silence. Daenerys kept her composure, though her pulse quickened. "You may speak in your defense, or appoint someone to do so." Cersei's gaze roved the stands, searching, perhaps, for a friendly face, a last ally. She found none. Her voice came out tight. "My champion is dead. My advisors have deserted me. I require no one to speak for me. The truth of the spectacle is plain. You want my head, and you'll have it one way or another." Septon Maribald stepped forward. "Do you wish to deny the charges? Our realm has seen the destruction of the great September of Baelor, set aflame by wildfire under your command. Many died, sparrows, nobles, even your own uncle, Kevin Lannister." At the mention of Kevin, Cersei's face twitched. She drew in a sharp breath. "I did what I had to do to save the city from the fanatics who held it hostage. The High Sparrow threatened my son, he threatened the very rule of law. Those who perished were enemies." Murmurs rippled among the spectators. Septon Maribald went on gently. "Many innocents died that day. Do you not acknowledge their lives held value?" Cersei set her jaw. "Anyone who stands against the crown is not innocent." Lord Redwyne stepped in. "You took the throne after Tommen's death. You claimed the city for yourself, refused all parley, and made alliances with Euron Greyjoy to hold the seas. You forced the people of King's Landing into submission, starved them, and used them as shields in your war against Daenerys Targaryen. Do you deny that?" Her chin rose. "I deny none of it. A queen must do what is necessary. Daenerys Targaryen threatened the city with dragons. I prepared for war." Daenerys listened, her heart pounding at the sheer force of Cersei's cold rationale. "You also reneged on your pledge to aid in the war against the threat beyond the wall, if that threat was ever real. You used the promise merely as a ploy to undermine Jon Snow's forces." Cersei laughed, a hollow sound. "So Jon Snow was gullible enough to believe I would risk my armies in the frozen waste? He was naive, like many men. I made no such vow to help. I said what needed to be said to keep him away." More mutters from the crowd. Those loyal to House Stark or who had heard tales of the king in the north looked on with contempt. Even among neutral onlookers, Cersei's admission played poorly. Septon Maribald spoke softly. "What of the torment inflicted on the small folk? The extortion, the forced conscriptions, the burnings? Has your heart no remorse?" Cersei gave him a regal sneer. "You presume I should weep for them? They are fodder pawns in the great game. Let the gods judge me if they will. But do not pretend you are any better. This Targaryen queen burned the Red Keep, did she not?" A hush fell. Daenerys did not flinch. She addressed the tribunal. "Yes, I burned the Red Keep to break your hold on the city and spare it a protracted siege. I aimed my dragons at a symbol of Lannister power, not at the innocent masses in the streets. The difference stands for all to see." Cersei spat at the ground. "A difference without meaning. How many died in that conflagration? How many families lost someone? My father once told me that power is power, and you have it now, so you can keep playing at righteousness." Daenerys felt anger coil in her gut, but she kept her poise. "You stand before us, accused of crimes against the realm. The city will hear witness to these crimes. Bring forth the first witness." A line of people emerged, survivors of the great September's destruction, families of those slain by the gold cloaks or the mountain, even a few northern soldiers who had come south under the assumption of truce. Each told a piece of the story, how Cersei's orders led to the deaths of hundreds, how she starved the city while hosting lavish feasts in the keep, how she used the threat of wildfire to keep the city in terror. Each testimony came in halting, emotional accounts. Some wept, others shook with rage. Cersei stood silent, her eyes dead to their pain. At last, Daenerys said, "You can respond to these testimonies if you wish." Cersei's only reply was a cold stare. "I see no point in responding. You'll condemn me either way." Lord Redwyne cleared his throat. "If that is your final stance, then we shall deliver our judgment. Septon Maribald, your verdict." The Septon inhaled, glancing at Cersei with mingled pity and sorrow. "I find her guilty of murder and sacrilege. May the gods have mercy on her soul." Lord Redwyne said, "I find her guilty of treason, murder, and conspiracy against the rightful throne. May the realm find peace in her sentencing." Daenerys took a step forward, every eye upon her. "Cersei of House Lannister, I, Daenerys Storborn of House Targaryen, Queen of the Undulls and the First Men, Breaker of Chains, find you guilty of all charges. I sentence you to death." The crowd erupted, some cheered, some wept, and a handful cried for a more painful end. Daenerys raised her hand, silencing them. "It will be a swift end. We are not barbarians. We need no spectacle of torture. Let it be known I show mercy even now. Guards!" A sudden clamor broke out at the rear of the courtyard. A knot of armed men wearing half-burned Lannister tabards shoved through the onlookers, swords drawn. "Free the queen," one roared, brandishing a battered shield. There were perhaps a dozen of them, desperate and wild-eyed. The unsullied lines formed instantly, spears lowered in deadly arcs. The crowd shrank back, many screaming. Daenerys stepped in front of the dais, her heart pounding. Grey Worm, at her side, barked commands in High Valyrian. The front rank of Unsullied advanced with perfect discipline, presenting a wall of spear points. The ragged Lannister loyalists charged, cornered animals flinging themselves at certain death. Within moments, the ring of steel on steel reverberated in the courtyard. A few of the loyalists tried to circle around, aiming for the dais. Daenerys stood firm. She refused to retreat. Grey Worm and 2 Unsullied stepped in, delivering precise thrusts that toppled the attackers before they got close. The melee ended as abruptly as it began, leaving half the Lannister loyalists dead on the ground. A few others dropped their weapons, surrendering. Their leader, a grizzled man with a bleeding gash across his brow, stared up at the dais, pure hatred in his eyes. "Long live Queen Cersei," he spat, then collapsed under a spear thrust. A hush fell once more, the entire courtyard trembling with tension. Daenerys exhaled slowly, her pulse thrashing in her ears. She forced herself to project calm, stepping back onto the dais. She glanced at Cersei, who regarded the failed rescue attempt with a mask of bitter amusement. The dethroned queen said nothing, but her gaze spoke volumes. "You see? There will always be blood for me." Daenerys turned to the crowd. "Enough. Cersei Lannister is guilty and her sentence stands. She will die tomorrow at dawn. Until then, she remains imprisoned." The crowd roiled with conflicting emotions, but the spectacle was over for the day. Guards hauled Cersei off, her expression as cold as winter steel. Daenerys surveyed the bodies strewn across the courtyard, Lannister men who refused to yield, who had thrown their lives away in a final, futile gesture. The realm's scars ran deep. That evening, Daenerys retired to the same modest chamber in the keep's remnants, shoulders aching with the day's strain. Tyrion arrived, his face drawn. "I suppose congratulations are in order. The trial is over. Tomorrow she dies." Daenerys lifted a hand to massage her temple. "It had to be done, but it hasn't brought me joy." "I know," Tyrion said quietly. He fiddled with the hem of his tunic. "There's one last question. How will the sentence be carried out?" A heaviness settled over Daenerys. She recalled the many times she'd wielded fire as her tool of justice. In Astapor, she burned the slave master. In Meereen, she crucified the great masters. Her dragons had brought unimaginable fear. Now, she balanced the memory of those decisions with the woman she strove to be here in Westeros, a queen who tempered her iron will with compassion, who broke cycles of brutality. "I could have Drogon do it," she said, her voice dull, "and the city would see it as a final statement that House Targaryen's wrath consumes traitors. But is that truly the message I want?" Tyrion's eyes flicked to hers. "What message do you wish to send?" She rose, pacing slowly. "That I am no tyrant. That I do not revel in cruelty. We've had enough burning. I'll grant her a swift beheading, as is the custom for noble traitors. She loses her life, but the realm doesn't see me incinerate her like a mad king might have done. It may not please those who want a spectacle, but it's the just course." Tyrion bowed his head. "As you say, your grace. I'll make the arrangements." In the quiet that followed, Daenerys felt the final weight of decision settle upon her. She had once envisioned vengeance on the Lannisters as a glorious victory, but real life was far more somber. Even a just punishment left a bitter taste. She gazed at the cracked walls and the slivers of distant stars visible through them. Westeros would soon witness the end of Cersei Lannister, one of the realm's most notorious rulers. But the memory of Cersei's tyranny and the memory of Targaryen fire would endure, shaping how people perceived Daenerys's every move. She prayed that in time her reign would be defined not by how many she burned or slew, but by how many she saved. Dawn came with a hazy sky, a pale yellow glow diffused by lingering clouds. In a courtyard adjacent to the rubble of the Red Keep, a wooden block stood. Unsullied guards kept watch in every direction, their ranks triple what they were the day before. A hush lay over the city as though King's Landing itself held its breath. Word of Cersei's imminent execution had spread quickly, drawing curious onlookers to vantage points and roofs. The small folk, used to the cruelty of public executions, braced for the spectacle. Some wore grim smiles. Having lived under Lannister oppression, they saw this as overdue justice. Others were merely anxious, unsure whether more bloodshed would follow. Daenerys arrived in a dark cloak, escorted by Grey Worm and Jorah Mormont. Tyrion stood off to one side with a group of lesser lords who had come to witness. Septon Maribald offered prayers under his breath. Lord Redwine wore a hard expression. At the center of the courtyard was the block, and a headsman stood in readiness, black hood pulled low over his face, a shining great sword in his hands. He was a tall, silent man chosen by Grey Worm for his steadiness and skill. When Cersei was brought forth, her hair was newly shorn, an attempt to rid her of any hidden implements or means of suicide overnight. She stumbled, the chains around her ankles clinking. Two Unsullied held her arms, guiding her forward. She still exuded a fierce pride, even in her final hour, though her face had gone pale. Daenerys stepped forward, her voice loud enough for all to hear. "Cersei Lannister, you have been found guilty of treason, murder, and crimes against the realm. Your sentence is death, carried out here and now." Cersei lifted her chin. "You think you've won?" she rasped. "This city will resent you in time, Targaryen. One day they'll curse your name as they once cursed mine." Daenerys' expression remained impassive. "We'll see if you're proven right. Kneel." The guards forced Cersei to her knees before the block. She twisted slightly, glaring back at Daenerys. "At least I'll die a queen, not a slave to illusions of kindness." Yora's lips tightened, but Daenerys showed no outward reaction. "Farewell, Cersei of House Lannister." The headsman stepped forward. In one swift motion, he lifted the greatsword. There was a collective intake of breath, a silence so profound it seemed the entire city stilled. The sword descended with a final, heavy blow. Blood splashed across the wooden planks, and Cersei Lannister's head fell from her shoulders. The hush shattered as a chorus of gasps, sobs, and startled cries washed over the courtyard. The unsmiling headsman wiped his blade on a cloth while the Unsullied guards removed the body. Daenerys stood rooted to the spot. She had carried out the judgment, ended Cersei's reign with the mercy of a clean death. Yet in that moment, all she felt was a hollow ache. There was no triumph in it, only the knowledge that an era had closed, and with it, the last vestige of open Lannister rule. Tyrion's face was pale, but he approached. "It's done," he said softly. "The city will talk of this for years." Daenerys nodded. "Yes. Now let us see if we can build a world where no one must become what Cersei became." She turned, cloak trailing on the damp stone, and left the courtyard as the onlookers dispersed in hushed waves. Some lingered to stare at the stained wooden block as though trying to reckon with the finality of it all. Over the following days, King's Landing seemed poised on a knife's edge. The city had experienced war, then a sudden shift in power, then the trial and execution of the former queen. Daenerys doubled the efforts to feed the hungry and rebuild homes. She ordered her men to treat Lannister loyalists fairly, offering them an oath of peace in exchange for clemency. Many accepted, preferring life and a chance at a future over hopeless rebellion. A small fraction refused and tried to flee or fight in the shadows. The Dothraki hunted them down. Publicly, Daenerys stated that the death of Cersei ended the need for more bloodshed, and that new beginnings awaited all who laid aside old hatred. Jaime Lannister remained in the keep's infirmary. His fever had broken, but he was still weak, his leg in a splint, his head wrapped in bandages. Tyrion visited him often, speaking in hushed tones. From what Daenerys heard, Jaime asked about Cersei only once, and when told of her fate, he closed his eyes and said nothing more. His grief seemed to consume him from within. The city's myriad tasks absorbed Daenerys' energy. Each morning, she rose to hold audiences with local guilds, masons, carpenters, blacksmiths, and coordinate the massive reconstruction. She allotted funds from the royal treasury that Tyrion and Missandei managed. Though the Lannisters had depleted much of it waging war, enough gold remained for initial relief efforts, and new shipments from Dorne provided impetus to trade. Step by step, King's Landing crawled toward recovery. As the capital slowly stabilized, ravens flew across Westeros, bearing the news that the Iron Throne, if it still existed, was claimed by Daenerys Targaryen. Many lords weighed the wisdom of challenging her when she held dragons and commanded large armies. The North remained aloof, with Sansa Stark apparently fortifying her own rule and focusing on the rumored threat beyond the wall. The Vale kept a polite distance but maintained open communication. Dorne signaled more warmth with each passing week, as Kono Martell's envoys visited with gifts and spoke of forging a better future under Targaryen leadership. Weeks turned into a month, then two. The charred remains of the Red Keep were slowly dismantled, stone by stone, to clear the site for eventual rebuilding. Daenerys often walked the edges of that rubble, imagining what new seat might rise in place of the old fortress. Should she attempt to resurrect the keep as it once was, or create a new palace altogether, forging a break from the past? She hadn't yet decided. Amidst the swirl of daily governance, she found moments to talk privately with Missandei, or to ride her dragons beyond the city walls. She soared above farmland with Drogon and Rhaegal, checking for bandits or strife. She flew all the way to the Crownland's borders, letting the wind clear her mind. The dragons rejoiced in these flights, plunging through clouds, roaring challenges to the open skies. Each time Daenerys landed, she prayed that the memory of the day she burned the Red Keep would never poison her bond with her children. They had done what she commanded, but they too had sensed the tension between conquest and compassion. One late afternoon, after returning from such a flight, Daenerys alighted in the wide outer yard where the dragons often rested. Tyrion and a handful of soldiers waited, looking grave. The instant Daenerys dismounted, Tyrion approached. "We've had unexpected visitors, Your Grace." Soldiers bearing Stark banners. They traveled fast and arrived at the city gates an hour ago. They demand an audience. Daenerys glanced at Drogon, who growled softly, then back at Tyrion. Did they say what they want? Who leads them? A woman with reddish-brown hair. She introduced herself as Brienne of Tarth, sworn to Sansa Stark. There's also a man known as Podrick Payne, and about 20 men-at-arms. They say they have urgent matters to discuss. Daenerys's heart quickened. Bring them in. Prepare the courtyard. Tyrion hesitated. Brienne of Tarth is widely known to be honorable. She once served Renly Baratheon, then Catelyn Stark. If she's here, it could mean Sansa sent her in good faith. Within the hour, Daenerys stood in the courtyard, flanked by Grey Worm and a line of Unsullied. On the opposite side, the gates opened to reveal Brienne, Podrick, and their men. They wore traveling cloaks dusty from the road, each marked with the direwolf sigil. Brienne herself stood tall, her plate armor bearing the Stark device. She removed her helm, revealing earnest blue eyes and hair pulled back in a simple arrangement. She approached Daenerys, then bowed low. "Your Grace, I come on behalf of Lady Sansa Stark of Winterfell. We have heard that Cersei Lannister is gone and that you hold King's Landing. My lady wishes to open dialogue regarding the defense of the realm." Daenerys inclined her head. "Well met, Sir Brienne. I've heard of your reputation. Your loyalty is renowned. What message does Lady Sansa send?" Brienne straightened, her voice steady. "She wishes to confirm that the threat of the White Walkers is real. Word comes from Eastwatch by the Sea and the Wall that strange sightings have occurred, restless dead, whites, attacks on wildlings. She urges you to consider an alliance, to send aid, or to at least prepare for the possibility that the realm's greatest danger lies not in the south, but in the far north." The courtyard rustled with surprise. Daenerys glanced at Tyrion, who wore a guarded expression. She recalled the Vale Knight's warning, the quiet rumors swirling from the north. "I'm aware of these stories, but have yet to see proof," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "What evidence does Lady Sansa offer?" Brienne reached into a pouch, withdrawing a battered piece of what looked like blackened bone or charred stone. She held it up. "This is a fragment of the Dragoglass arrow that killed a wight near Harhome, retrieved by the Free Folk. We have other accounts, sightings, survivors' testimonies. If you wish, I can arrange for a raven with first-hand reports. Or we can send for Tormund Giantsbane, a wildling leader, to bring further proof." Daenerys studied the fragment, a shard of obsidian glinting darkly in the torchlight. Her heart drummed with curiosity and a flicker of dread. If these stories were true, if an undead army marched beyond the wall, ignoring it could be catastrophic. Yet she also recalled her own city's fragility. If an army of the dead is coming, what does Lady Sansa propose? Brienne's gaze was unwavering. "She proposes unity. She knows your rule in the south is still new, but the entire realm may need to unite if the worst is true. She invites you or your envoys to Winterfell to see the evidence yourself, to speak with those who have fought these creatures." Daenerys exchanged a look with Tyrion. This felt like a momentous turning point. Having just secured the capital, she was being asked to shift focus to a distant threat. But if the threat was real and she ignored it, the consequences could be dire. After all, she had come to break the wheel, not watch it be devoured by an inhuman menace. She turned back to Brienne. "Very well. I will send envoys to Winterfell. We'll seek a measure of truth in these reports. If the threat is real, I will consider an alliance. But my presence in King's Landing remains necessary for now. The city is still recovering. One misstep and chaos could return." Brienne bowed again. "Lady Sansa anticipated this, Your Grace. She also suggested that if you cannot come, perhaps you would send someone you trust." She's prepared to receive them under safe conduct, ensuring no harm will come to Targaryen men in the north. Daenerys nodded slowly. Then so it shall be. I will name an envoy soon. Until then, you and your men can remain here as honored guests, though I know you likely wish to return north quickly. Brienne's expression softened. Thank you, your grace. My vow to Lady Sansa compels me to stand with her. I will remain only as long as needed to finalize details, then depart. They exchanged a few more formalities, after which Brienne and her men were taken to a secure set of guest quarters. Daenerys pulled Tyrion aside. I must choose someone who can speak for me effectively, she said. Someone the North will trust and who can evaluate the threat. Tyrion pressed his lips together, pondering. There's Sir Davos Seaworth. If we can find him, he once served Stannis Baratheon and has good standing in the north. Or we might consider Yora, though the Mormonts had a tumultuous relationship with House Stark. Or perhaps you could ask the Vale or the Riverlords to send a neutral party. Daenerys exhaled. I must think carefully. Her mind flickered to Jaime Lannister, ironically, a man the North might hate, but who had seen wonders in his time. Yet he was in no condition to travel, and his presence might provoke hostility. She shook her head. I'll consult with others tonight. As night fell, Daenerys went to the temporary infirmary where Jaime rested. Perhaps it was curiosity or some intangible sense that he had lived through enough to grasp the realm's precarious state. She found him propped up in bed, a bandage around his head, his complexion wan. He turned when she entered, and for a moment he just stared, uncertain how to address the queen who had shown him reluctant mercy. Your Grace, he said finally. She inclined her head. Jaime Lannister. How fare you? A bitter smile touched his lips. Better than the alternative. I can move my leg again, though it's stiff. My head's a drum at times. But the healers say I might live. Daenerys stepped closer. I want to ask you something. You traveled with Brienne of Tarth at one point, I recall. Do you trust her word? A flicker of surprise crossed his face. I do. She's the most honorable knight I've known. If she says the dead walk, then I believe it. A chill skirted Daenerys' spine. Then you truly think this threat is real? Jaime's eyes dropped to the blanket. I used to scoff at such tales, but I've heard enough from men I trust. If the rumors are half true, we may be facing something beyond the petty wars of houses. The living must stand together. She studied him carefully, this one-handed knight who had once been her family's betrayer. If you were well enough to travel, would you consider going north? As part of my envoy? You have connections, some might see you as an enemy, but Brienne's presence could mitigate that. She trusts you in her own way. He looked stunned. You would trust me to go north on your behalf? After everything? She crossed her arms. Stranger alliances have been made. If you want a chance at redemption, a chance to fight for something larger than yourself, this might be it. His expression tightened with old regret and a flicker of what might have been longing. Then he bowed his head. My queen, if you will have me, I'll do it. Though I'd warn you, I'm no longer the swordsman I once was. Daenerys placed her hand lightly on the bed's edge. Your mind might serve better than your sword. Speak with Brienne. Arrange a meeting with Lady Sansa. Learn the truth of the threat. And if it proves real, send word so I can rally the realm. A slow acceptance dawned in Jaime's eyes. I will. She gave a curt nod. Then rest. We'll see how soon you can travel. Leaving him, Daenerys mulled over the choice. It was risky. Sending Jaime Lannister north could be a diplomatic disaster if he was not received or if he turned coat. But her instincts told her that the man was done with duplicity. Perhaps offering him a role in the realm's salvation was as good for him as it was for Westeros. She thought of Tyrion, his pleas for his brother's life, and felt a glimmer of hope that House Lannister might, in some way, be redeemed through Jaime's actions. 2 days later, a small party set out from King's Landing. Jaime Lannister, still weak but resolute, Brienne of Tarth, who had waited patiently for him to recover enough to ride, Podrick Payne, and a handful of soldiers bearing the Targaryen sigil. They rode under a combined banner, one half the dire wolf of Stark, the other half the three-headed dragon of Targaryen, symbolic of their uncertain cooperation. The city watched them depart at dawn, whispers flitting among the bystanders about whether this new alliance could stand or if war would ignite again. Daenerys stood on the ramparts, Drogon perched behind her, his massive bulk outlined against the early light. She watched the riders pass through the gates and fade into the road that wound northward. The future of the realm might hinge on what they discovered. If the undead threat was real, she would need to unite all corners of Westeros. If it proved false or exaggerated, at least she would have shown a willingness to investigate, demonstrating caution and rationality. As the sun rose higher, the city below stirred in earnest, laborers clambering over half-rebuilt walls, wagons rolling in with goods, crafters shaping new timbers. Life pulsed in King's Landing once more. She felt the burden of her crown. Decisions made here would echo from Dorne to the Wall. Daenerys placed a hand on the stone battlement, letting the warmth of the sun soak in, reminding herself of why she fought, why she burned the Red Keep, why she offered mercy afterward. She had not come merely to conquer, but to build a world better than the one she inherited. Days passed, then weeks. Letters exchanged between Daenerys and Sansa grew more cordial but remained cautious. The city kept healing, its populace adapting to Targaryen rule. The name Daenerys Storborn began to evoke a blend of fear, respect, and guarded admiration. Some unscrupulous men tested her laws, smugglers or kidnappers, but they were punished swiftly with fair trials that ended in stiff sentences. The small folk murmured that justice under the Dragon Queen felt more even-handed than under Cersei's yoke, if not always lenient. Meanwhile, the news from beyond King's Landing trickled in. Euron Greyjoy had vanished after Cersei's fall, rumored to be lurking in the Narrow Sea or retreated to the Iron Islands. Daenerys considered sending ships to chase him, but her fleet was still regrouping. The Iron Islands were bleak and unwelcoming, and with no alliances left, Euron might not be an immediate threat. Still, she kept a wary eye. In the midst of these concerns, Dorne's Prince Kono Martell finally arrived in the capital, traveling with a retinue of elegantly dressed nobles. Daenerys greeted him in a repaired audience hall and open-air courtyard with new columns. Kono was in his late 30s, tall and slender, with dark hair pulled back and a mild, measured smile. He wore fine Dornish silks and carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who believed in his own authority. They exchanged pleasantries, each praising the other's willingness to negotiate. Kono hinted that Dorne might formally recognize Daenerys' claim if she supported their autonomy and respected their distinctive customs. Daenerys, in turn, signaled that she had no desire to crush Dorne's traditions. She only demanded that they acknowledge her as Queen of the Seven Kingdoms and participate in the realm's defense if a greater threat emerged. Over several sessions of discussion aided by Tyrion's diplomatic skill, a new alliance took shape. Dorne would reopen the ports of Sunspear to Targaryen ships and sign favorable trade pacts. In return, Daenerys would name Kono the Warden of the South, granting him prestigious standing. These negotiations concluded in a small ceremony where Kono pledged to support her rule. The crowd of onlookers in the courtyard applauded politely. It was a far cry from the old days of forced fealty. Daenerys believed that if she wanted loyalty, it should be given willingly, not under threat of dragonfire. That evening, a celebratory feast was held in the newly restored Grand Courtyard. Though hardly as opulent as the feasts King's Landing once knew, it symbolized a step toward stability. Long tables were laid with Dornish wine and southern dishes spiced with peppers. Musicians played soft tunes on lute and harp. Daenerys presided over the gathering with Tyrion at her right hand and Kono Martell on her left. Grey Worm and Missandei mingled among the guests, ensuring no trouble brewed. As Daenerys sipped a goblet of sweet red, Kono turned to her. "Your Grace, rumor travels fast in Dorne. We hear that you burned the Red Keep but spared most of the city. Some call you merciful, others call you the Dragon Queen with a hidden streak of Targaryen madness." He spoke candidly, as Dornish lords often did, unafraid to address the rumors directly. Daenerys gave a faint smile. "I've heard those whispers as well. I stand by what I did. Without that strike, the siege could have dragged on, killing thousands more. But I will not deny that the memory of Targaryen fire lingers. It's a burden I carry to show that my flames are wielded for liberation, not senseless destruction." Kono nodded thoughtfully, swirling his own wine. "Dorne knows the difference between righteous wrath and cruelty. Ours is a proud land that once resisted Targaryen conquest, but also found common cause with the dragons in later generations. I, for one, believe the realm is better with you than it was under the Lannisters." A flicker of gratitude warmed Daenerys. "Thank you for your faith. I hope to prove worthy of it." Their conversation drifted to other matters: trade routes, the future of the Stormlands, whether Gendry, the rumored Baratheon bastard, might have a claim there. The realm was in flux, a puzzle with many missing pieces. Yet Daenerys felt that with each passing day, she placed another piece, forging alliances that might hold the kingdom together when the next crisis inevitably arrived. And so time flowed onward, the sun rising and setting over a King's Landing in reconstruction. Streets were cleared of rubble, new timber frameworks sprouted where old homes had burned. Daenerys spent many evenings hearing the pleas of commoners, disputes over property lines, stolen livestock, or missing persons. She aimed to settle each fairly, a slow, painstaking labor that built trust better than any fiery demonstration ever could. The tension in the realm did not vanish, nor did the scars of war. Yet as the capital regained a sense of normalcy, the talk of rebellion faded to a murmur. Daenerys's banners, black with the three-headed dragon in crimson, flew from ramparts across the city. The shape of a new seat of power slowly emerged on the hill where the Red Keep once stood. Builders worked with a design Tyrion and Daenerys had commissioned, a fortress less labyrinthine, with open courtyards and a grand hall that could accommodate more than just the powerful lords. They named it Aegon's Rest during construction in memory of the first Targaryen conquest. But Daenerys made clear that it should be accessible to the people. She would not hide behind walls as thick as those the Lannisters had built around themselves. Still, under it all, Daenerys felt the subdued drumbeat of possibility. What if the undead threat was real? What if the alliances she built now must quickly turn their energies to war with an unimaginable foe? She wished fervently that the threat would prove to be no more than rumors. Yet she suspected that fate, once stirred, rarely allowed peace to linger unchallenged. The realm's future remained uncertain. One evening, after another round of audiences, Daenerys found herself alone on a balcony that overlooked the city. Torches glimmered below like scattered stars. Beyond the walls, she could see shapes moving, her dragons, perhaps, or patrolling riders. The breeze carried the scent of salt from Blackwater Bay, mingling with the smell of masonry dust. She closed her eyes, letting the wind tug at her hair. This was the city she had won, the city that both tested and elevated her. She thought of the moment she first saw its spires, the thunder of dragonfire that toppled the Red Keep, and the thousand choices that had followed. She'd walked the path between mercy and might, forging an uneasy balance that shaped her every deed. Sometimes, she felt the faint echo of her father's madness in the corners of her mind, whispering that sheer force was the only truth. Other times, she recalled the innocent faces that had looked to her in Essos, seeking liberation from cruelty. Each day, she chose anew the type of queen she would be. A faint sound from behind made her turn. Tyrion stood in the doorway holding a small lamp. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said softly, "but I brought fresh parchments for tomorrow's schedule." She waved him closer. "No intrusion, Tyrion. Come watch the city with me for a moment." He joined her at the balcony's edge, setting the lamp on the stone. Together, they looked out over the shimmering lights. A hush fell, comfortable and reflective. Then Tyrion said, "Sometimes I wonder how it might have been if we had done things differently. If we tried to talk to Cersei one last time. Or if we'd starved the city instead of burning the keep. But as it stands, we have a new dawn. And your rule seems to be taking shape, despite all the shadows that linger." Daenerys's voice was a near whisper. "I wonder too, but the past is sealed by our choices. We can only move forward. I intend to guide this city toward a better future than it's known in a long time." He looked up at her, the soft glow of the lamp reflecting in his mismatched eyes. "I believe you will." He paused, then cleared his throat lightly. "For what it's worth, I'm grateful you haven't repeated my family's worst mistakes. Or you our own fathers." A slight smile touched her lips. "We've had enough madness to last a dozen lifetimes." Their shared silence spoke volumes. Below, the city continued its nighttime rhythms. Muffled voices in alleyways, distant barking dogs, the scuff of watchmen's boots. Above, the stars gleamed cold and distant, unconcerned with mortal affairs. Yet every decision here might reshape the fate of millions. Daenerys turned from the balcony, reclaiming the lamp. "Tomorrow we set new plans in motion. The city must see that the crown is not idle. We'll open a new market, allocate more coin to the healers. We'll continue building trust. And we'll wait for word from the north." Tyrion fell into step behind her. "One day at a time, Your Grace." They made their way through the corridors, lamplight dancing on the walls. Daenerys's footsteps echoed. With each step, she reaffirmed her purpose. To stand between the people and the darkness, to break the wheel of tyranny, and if the time came, to face winter's terrors as well. She had burned the Red Keep and ended Cersei's reign with steel rather than unbridled flame, forging a new age from the wreckage. She only prayed that the next storm on the horizon would find Westeros better prepared, with Daenerys Targaryen at its helm, unwavering as dragonfire, yet tempered with the resolve of one who knew the price of both war and mercy. And thus, under the reign of Daenerys Stormborn, the city breathed again. Each day, the hammer of reconstruction rang against stone, shaping new walls and halls. Each sunrise, the markets opened a bit more confidently, and the people walked with cautious hope. The queen they called the Mother of Dragons, the breaker of chains, ruled not with the echo of madness but with a careful hand. Time would tell whether the realm might find unity in her shadow, or if the old ghosts of fear and strife would rise again. But for now, the capital of the Seven Kingdoms stood in the dawn of something that might just be a better world.